I'd like to be remembered for being the first face on Channel 4. That's what I'm really most proud of.
Our profile of the man himself, Richard Whiteley, television man on 4.
I am J.R. Whiteley, John Richard Whiteley. Yes, I mean, I didn't change my name to Richard. I was always called Richard by my parents. Why they didn't call me Richard John, I don't know, but John Richard. Well, my father was Thomas Kenneth and I was called Kenneth. So I think, nothing against Johns, but I'm glad I'm called Richard.
Round of applause, Richard Whiteley, come on, sing
This is Ferncliff Drive in Baildon, and this is the house where I grew up, number 23 Ferncliff Drive. It hasn't really changed a great deal. There's an extension here, I suppose. That wasn't there. You drive straight into a garage. Although we did have a wash house at the back, which other houses, although they were all fairly identical semis, didn't have a wash house. We had a wash house. Terrific. That was my bedroom, that small window there. And then I would eventually move into that bedroom, the big bedroom there, when my sister Helen was born in 1948. I also remember here, we were like the first people in the street to get a television. We got our TV in 1952, in November 1952. And I remember having, on that coronation day, having people coming in to watch the coronation at our house. I think one or two other people in the drive did have a TV, but there weren't so many. When I was in Ferncliff Drive, I was amazed to find two neighbours who still lived there. Barbara Lupton and a 95-year-old mother, Kathleen.
We can't forget you, can we?
No, well, it's not.
We don't want to do anyway. And it was a pity about Helen, wasn't it?
Well, Helen, the sister, yes, and
yes.
She died when she was 49.
Yes.
Because, you know, people say what's your earliest memory.
Oh, yes.
I can always remember coming back from hospital with Helen in a pink carry cot in the back of the car. And I can remember bringing you back here.
Yes.
That's what I can remember.
Yes.
Can you remember me living there then?
I can remember you, and my friend Janet and I used to push you out in your green pram.
Yeah.
And we taught you to walk on your entrance hall. We said, right, here he is, and then you would try one step and flop down, and we would heave you up,
Really?
being young and not knowing any better. And then eventually we said to your mother, he's done it, 3 or 4 steps.
I think that's the last exercise I ever got, I think, really. You could say my career in journalism started on Ferncliff Drive. Well, I used to get up early and deliver papers down there for Mr. Stubbs, but I was always impressed by a big house on the road next door, and in 1953 we moved there. And of all the houses that I used to love delivering papers to, this was the best, and I always used to ask Stubbs if I can go into this house, number 6, because obviously quite a nice house, but he had a pond in the garden. I mean, everyone's got water features now, haven't they, but very few people did in 1952. And I used to love that pond, and I think it must be fantastic to live in a house with a pond. And hey presto, in 1953, coronation year, would you believe it, my father, he bought this house for, I think, just over £4,000 from Dr. McGowan, who was living here at the time. Well, altogether, my parents lived here for about 40 years, so it was the house to which I came in the school holidays and the university holidays. When I started work at ITN, I used to come back here, and when I started work at Yorkshire TV, actually, before I bought a place, I would come here as well. So it's a great house. It means a lot to me. This is Eccleshill in Bradford, and this is Stone Hall Mills. This is where the family business was, Thomas Whiteley & Co. You can see it's no longer Thomas Whiteley & Co, but I'm very glad to say there's still a business here, and it looks like quite a prosperous one as well, because the mill basically is still the same, just as I remember it. And Over the years, the mill had been fairly prosperous. It was founded by Thomas Whiteley in 1874. It was first called Whiteley and Sutcliffe, then became Thomas Whiteley and Co. And Thomas Whiteley, who was my great-grandfather, had 4 sons and 1 grandson, the grandson being my father. After the war of the 50s, it was very difficult, the general contraction of the textile industry all around, really. Took lots of casualties, and this one was no exception. It was very difficult, and the place finally closed down in 1963. I was at university then, and my father would be about 55, just probably younger than I am now. He'd been here all his life, and it was a very upsetting time for him. But this is the spot here when television actually first came into my life, this remote and windswept spot on Baildon Moor. It seems very unlikely actually, but I'll just tell you how it started. I was coming back from school with my father on a Saturday morning. We went to school on a Saturday in those days. As we came over from Bingley up the hill here, parked on the very top of Baildon Moor was this big green van, this olive green, bottle green van with this crest on, "Nation shall speak peace unto nation." It was a BBC van. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe that a BBC van was parked on Baildon Moor a mile from where I live. And these gentlemen here, smoking cigarettes and treating me with complete disinterest, they were the first people from the BBC I ever met. To me, they were absolute gods. It was a fantastic experience. It was I wouldn't say it was a life-changing experience, but it was what would be described now as a defining moment in my life. The day I saw a van from the BBC right here on Baildon Moor. Who would have thought it? Who would have thought where it would all end?
And you, Richard.
Hello from the cliff top in Scarborough. I'm speaking to you live. Well, I don't know if you probably saw that.
If that had meant business, it would have been through to the bone. She's playing with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, she can come round and play anytime.
He was the sort of person who always won prizes on speech day. He was into all the intellectual sort of things that the school offered. So I can remember when he was very young, for instance, at school, giving a talk to the Literary Society on the fact that Shakespeare's plays were really written by Marlowe, an idea that's resurfaced recently. And I can remember him in a debating society giving an impassioned speech against co-education. A few years later, Giggleswick became a co-educational school.
I am exactly the same age as Richard. So I remember him as a clever little lad who wasn't much good at sport. Because my brothers were all at the school, but a bit older than him. He wasn't just the area I was most interested in.
The golden threads that run through Richard's life, the richest, the most golden of them all, even more important to him than Countdown or Calendar, or even YTV in all its manifestations, I think is Giggleswick. In his head, Richard is still at school.
Well, this was where I sat for 5 years, about 3 rows back from the pulpit, so I had a pretty good view of the pulpit. I remember sermons tended to go on a bit in those days, so I used to while away my time in 2 different ways. One was to read all the Latin inscriptions around the base of the dome and over the windows. I knew all those by heart, and it was obviously very good for the Latin, but far more interesting, I used to sit here and plan where I would place the cameras should a television outside broadcast do a service from the chapel. And funnily enough, about 35 years later, I was able to engineer an outside broadcast from here, and they did the ITV morning service from the chapel. I did volunteer my 30-year-old thoughts about where the camera should go, but I don't think the director of that programme was too impressed. You'd come here 3 times on a Sunday, and you certainly knew about it because you had the the journey up here, up from the school, up Chapel Hill, and onto the chapel itself, which is purposely built on this commanding position. It was a gift by Sir Walter Morrison, who was the local MP for Skipton at the time, and also a governor of the school. And nothing has changed for those 100 years now. The chapel is exactly the same as it was 100 years ago. One of the most moving services was the last night of term, and everyone used to come up here about 9:30, 9:45, and the whole chapel was in the dark, except for 2 candles on the altar. And this was a service in memory of those who died in the war, when of course there was a blackout, and services were held in the dark in those days. So you had to learn everything off by heart. But it was the same music and the same hymns every end of term. There was Elgar Nimrod, there was the London Derriere, there was Oh God I Help in Ages Past, and so on. And I guarantee it was a good job it was held in the dark, because even the 12-stone rugger-buggers, the big tough guys who were leaving, well, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and that included them. My father came here in the late 20s, and he was always very keen that I should come here. So I went to a day prep school in Bingley till I was just 13 years and 1 month, and came here in January of 1957. So he was prepared to make a big sacrifice, because frankly at that time the mill wasn't doing very well at all. There was really very little money, so he really had to scrape and scrimp to send me, although luckily I did get a scholarship. Having arrived here, I got a scholarship, I think the vast sum of £135 a year off the fees, which, believe you me, did help. And it's funny, sitting here in this all singing, all dancing, what is now a library, but this used to be the dining hall, and you just had to eat everything that was set in front of you. There was no mamby-pambing around. If it was set in front of you, you jolly well had to eat it. I did perfect a device. I found a tin in the sanatorium where they used to keep bandage tin, and I used to bring this tin in and sit at a table. And when nobody's looking, I could discreetly scrape the food from, put it in the tin, and take it out of this room, and empty it in the dustbin round the corner after lunch or after supper. So yeah, I was a thin boy and hopeless at sport. I mean, really hopeless at sport. I have a school record here which I'm very proud of, and I don't think it's ever going to be broken. And that is, I have a record of actually going a whole term, 12 weeks, played rugby 3 times a week, 36 rugby games. I never touched the ball once, never touched it.
To see Richard Whiteley and Russell Harty, they were like Morecambe and Wise. They were just this wonderful double act who were happy. They were just happy in the Yorkshire sunshine, drinking great wine, laughing and enjoying life.
I wonder, Whiteley, if you bothered at all to read the title of this particular essay, which I took the liberty and pain of writing on this particular blackboard. What does it say?
It says account for Hamlet's delay, sir.
And how do you think you've answered the question?
Well, sir, there's 10 pages, sir, and I've just...
I am not discussing quantity, I'm talking about quality and the ability to actually get to the heart of a matter. Your concepts are rather hazy.
I saw that film Dead Poets Society, and as I saw it, I couldn't believe it, because it was just so much like what happened here. It was the mid-50s, it was a boarding school, it was in the country, it was the staff were died in their ways and grey-haired and so on, and then this Robin Williams character came, just like Russell, and inspired all the boys to love English and love poetry, and built a great cult around him of energy and inspiration and love of life and love of literature. And as I watched this film, I couldn't, because I didn't know what it was about till I saw it, and I just couldn't believe it. And I just thought, that's just like Russell Harty, the influence he had. If I hadn't gone to Giggleswick, I may not have gone on to Cambridge University and so on to ITN, and from there to Yorkshire TV. In fact, I know I owe the school a great debt of gratitude. I wrote to Donald Baverstock, who was a great hero of the TV generation at the time, and he interviewed me, and so did Ward Thomas, who was then the managing director. And I remember Ward saying to Donald Baverstock, well, if you like him, I suppose he'll do. So I said, I'm on 1850. And there was a great silence. And I thought, oh, he knows I'm telling a lie. So Geoffrey Cox has told him. So then he said, no, how's 2,500 a year sound? And I was so gobsmacked. Now it was my turn to be silent. Absolutely. So I couldn't believe it. I went dry-throated. 2,500 a year. And he thought I was playing silly buggers, really. And he said, OK, well, what about 2,600? And I then had to say, yes, thank you, that'll be fine. So I left ITN and came to Yorkshire, and I arrived in Yorkshire in the first week of April 1968. That's about 3 months before we went on the air.
Working on Calendar in the early days was huge fun. Yorkshire Television hadn't been going very long, and there was a sense that we were breaking new boundaries, that every day we were doing something different. There was a lot of very talented people working on the programme, including Richard, and we felt we could do anything, and it was a wonderful learning experience.
We used to go out of our way to try and make Calendar not only a good news programme, but also an unmissable programme. And Richard was very much a part of that.
The last time anything newsworthy happened in Bardney was, according to local experts, in the year 642. Every day during the summer they come out and painstakingly go through the clover patch to reap that day's harvest. Well, let's see how they're getting on today.
And more, much more than this, I did it I just loved those years, those calendar years. I very rarely took days off because I couldn't bear being at home and watching someone else do calendar. And ultimately, of course, I did leave calendar.
Thanks very much.
All right. Okay.
Well,
so come back and see us.
It's all been a lot of fun, but we'll have more fun. The fun will go on.
Yeah.
In another place.
We'll see you later.
Okay.
I do regard those years of being anchorman of calendar. I was the sole anchorman in those days, and then jointly with Jeff Druitt and then with Krista, as the best years of my life. And when I look back on this transient medium that we do, we're here today, gone tomorrow, you do calendar, 6:30, it's all finished. Although the best thing, it's a bit like sex really, it's either been good or average or bad. Either way, it's all over. Hello, Richard. But if all goes well, you can do it again the next day. And that was the best thing about calendar. It was orgasmic, and I did end each day on a high. It was every day was a first night with calendar. A wonderful date.
And cue Richard.
Hello from the cliff top in Scarborough. I'm speaking to you live. Well, I don't know if you probably saw that, and it says it all. It says it all.
The famous, the immortal ferret incident will live in our hearts and minds forever.
Ow, ow, ow! I'm sorry. Ow! The reason he's been seen in more countries than any other television personality in history is because of the ferret.
It's all right, let it go. Put it on the floor, it won't hurt you.
It is hurting me.
Put it down.
The ferret incident happened in 1977, which is a long time ago. But never to be forgotten. It's made everyone laugh. It's made the whole world laugh. And I know that will be my epitaph. I think when the Grim Reaper arrives, it won't say, the obits won't say, perceptive TV interviewer dies, or popular parlour game afternoon TV host dies. Ferret man dies, because I'm known as a ferret man. I think everyone's seen that clip. It's one of the most famous clips in the world now.
Thank you. If that had meant business, it would have been through to the bone. She's playing with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, she can come round and play anytime. Countdown, in fact, is about numbers as well as letters, and we figure we've got a pretty good figure ruling that part of the game. Meet our vital statistician, Carol Vorderman. She's a Cambridge graduate, and she works in computers.
Happy birthday.
All you have to do, choose some letters, put them in a row, and make a word from it. I mean, I could have thought of that. Feeble. I did report on many tragedies and big news stories that happened in Yorkshire, but I suppose the biggest news story I was involved in was not even in Yorkshire, and it was the Brighton bomb.
He was actually sitting in the Grand Hotel when the bomb went off, and having gone down there just to have a rather good time and have a few drinks, be in party mood in fact, he found himself right at the centre of one of the major stories of the decade. And of course, he acquitted himself with great journalistic honour. Sod him, he got the best story, and I'd gone home.
Well, it's now just about a couple of hours after this blast has ripped out the front there of the Grand Hotel. You can see the floors there ripped apart, the top floor and right down to about the second floor, just sliced out. I was actually standing in the foyer of the hotel at about 5 to 3. I'd actually just been talking to a group of delegates from Bradford.
A second bigger bang, and that threw me on the floor, and I fell to the floor in slow motion. I just felt crumpling up in slow motion against the oh-so-soft carpet. And I noticed, actually, they'd had a new carpet in the Grand Hotel since I was there last year, and crumpled up on the carpet in slow motion. And then the third noise. So I thought, 3 bombs, that's it. And yes, I did have the life running past me. And then I thought, Mrs. Thatcher's upstairs. They can't get Mrs. Thatcher. They wouldn't do. This can't happen. So with my dying thoughts were, first of me not having a bad life, and B, the thoughts of Mrs. Thatcher. If that doesn't get me a night, nothing will, and it didn't seem to work. I have interviewed every Prime Minister since Wilson, although I did interview Alec Douglas-Home, but that was after he'd resigned as Prime Minister. So yes, I have interviewed all the Prime Ministers. When I interviewed Mrs. Thatcher the first time, she was Leader of the Opposition, and we did a sort of person-to-person interview about the woman behind the image. And I go hot and cold now, but I asked her. I somehow found out that she was the second Mrs. Thatcher, that Dennis Thatcher had been married before.
It was an electrifying moment, and she responded. She responded brilliantly to it. Another great coup for irritating old Richard Whiteley.
Can I just ask you this? When you did marry Dennis Thatcher, it wasn't widely known at the time. It wasn't really known until fairly late, actually, till about 25 years later, that he'd been married before. Why did you feel that was a good idea to keep it secret?
But one didn't. One just wasn't asked. And you don't go about saying, look, my husband's been married before.
There was an explosion. I mean, outrage and everything. And Gordon Rees, who was her PR man, said, this will have to be cut, this can't be taken on, this mustn't go out.
Both Paul Fox and yours truly were off Mrs. Thatcher's Christmas card list for quite some time after that.
The last words Gordon Rees said as he left Yorkshire Television with her, he said, she will never come back here again.
What was Richard like as a political interviewer?
Hopeless.
On the Monday night, as it came to that conclusion, and the total going up and up, I remember saying, come on, the only way is up. And every time we pressed the button, up went the total. It was magic, it was magic. And then finally, the final total, when that was revealed, it was just a most wonderful moment. And I'll never forget that.
Thank you. 2,247,721 pounds.
Some American telephone experts, they said, you'll have a great feeling. He said, you'll feel great when it ends. And you'll go to bed feeling great, but the next day you'll feel as depressed as you've ever been in your life. And it was true. It's a great high, the highest high I've ever had. And also afterwards, the lowest low I've ever had. Amazing.
I remember many years later, maybe I was at a dentist or a doctor's or something, and I just turned on the television, and there was Countdown, and there was Richard, and I was completely dumbfounded.
Hello, good evening, and as the countdown to a brand new channel ends, a brand new countdown begins.
The countdown years have just flown by, those 21 years, and what started as just a 4-week experiment, really, just a commission just for the 4 weeks, has grown into 21 years. The same hairstyle for
a long time.
40 years. Can't do with dull ties. The jackets are, sadly they're all, I'm afraid, made overseas. Well, one or two have been tailored in Yorkshire, but I try and, this one was handmade in Yorkshire, and it's Yorkshire cloth, so I do try and keep the faith.
After a little bit of time, I started to make jokes about his jackets, and he didn't like it at all. He used to pull me to one side and tell me off. I don't think it's appropriate that you should make comments about my clothing. And I just burst out laughing, you see, because I thought it was hysterically funny.
She really got on my nerves in those early days, because I was having to keep the whole programme going, and you've got this, and what's you, and what's the score, doing all this, having to keep it going. All she did was work out the numbers. That was her only job at the time. And I could see her from the corner of my eye in the studio, sitting on a stool, and doing all that and laughing with the technicians and all the crew.
After a couple of years of getting used to each other, I was more like his little sister. And then as time progressed, I've become like a kind of, strangely, an older sister to him, like a big sister, because he's become more infantile as the years have gone on.
She never knows what I'm going to throw at her. She's got a great sense of humour. She teases me remorselessly. According to her, I've got no bottom, I wear a wig, I'm totally confused, I'm on another planet. Is there sexual chemistry between us? Well, yes, if there is, we're using different chemistry sets, all this kind of thing. But actually, we're great pals and great mates, and I think it works very well.
Happy birthday.
People will talk.
Richard and Carol's relationship is they are TV husband and wife, which sometimes is slightly annoying for me because people always call me Carol.
He did win an award. He went to the Chelsea Flower Show this year in May, and he ran naked through the main marquee. And he won first prize for the best dried arrangement.
I absolutely love being on Countdown. I tried for years to get onto Countdown. I changed agents even to try and get onto Countdown and still failed miserably. And I tell you what, it's no lie, it's one of the highlights of my year to get called to come up on Countdown. It's like a great family.
Can you please, I know that people like coughing on quiz shows, but if you were going to cough, can you please not cough when I'm speaking? I've had letters which I've received which have just said Dick, England. And, you know, they've arrived. And the post office has put, try R. Whiteley, Yorkshire TV. So I've had Dick, England, which does surprise me. I've had one that said Dick Head, England, which surprised me a little less because they got here. And then I've had one that said First Class Dick, England, which has also arrived. So I just say, aren't our post office wonderful?
He said to me once, he said, look, could you ever sort of big up my personality? Well, I said, there's very little people can do about your personality, Richard. He said, no, but can you do something? So I said, okay, I'll try and portray you as a sex god. He said, yeah, because I am, aren't I? And I said, no, you're not. You're a total failure. However, I shall tell the public that you are twice nightly Whiteley.
I think Richard loves it. I think he loves it. This is his image of himself. You know, Richard is the hail fellow well met. You know, he manages to be a great man with the boys, and he loves the boys to think that he's off for a night with the girls, and probably more than one, or certainly more than once.
I think he's quite handsome. You know, you want to give him a love and a big kiss or something. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just his way, his manner.
He's absolutely devastating to women. You take Richard to a party, even down in, say, Sloane Square, or, you know, where they're all a bit toffee-nosed. And he gets to the party, and within minutes he's talking to them all. He's got them all wrapped round his little finger. You can never get him away.
Of course, I was a late starter, single-sex school, hopeless at dancing. Cambridge University, there was 10 men to every one woman there. I do like the company of ladies, and I do like flirting. and I do like being flirted with, and I admit it. Yes, I am a lover of ladies. Don't quote that out of context. I saw Candy in this upmarket furniture shop, and to cut a long story short, we got married about a year later. So that was an absolutely gorgeous girl. So it was a very happy day when we got married. Lovely day in June, sunny day, and terrific. Yeah, but the marriage didn't last very long, about a year and a quarter, really, which I was very sorry about, actually, and very sorry indeed. In fact, without being too dramatic about it, I seem to remember that on calendar, almost every day, for practically a year, I wore a black tie, because I felt